a lot of it developed in Paris. And if you look at the history of French culture since the Second World War, it's kind of, it has some strange characteristics. Say, let's take the 1970s when this began to blossom. The French intellectuals were the last Stalinists, but if they weren't Stalinists, they were Maoists. I mean, I remember, I don't know if it's fair to mention names, but let's say Kristeva, I happened to meet in the mid-70s, flaming Maoist. And it was pretty common all the way through. The French intellectuals have there's a history in France which has justification that they're somehow at the peak of cultural life. So they have to be in whatever they're doing, that's what's important. In fact, France is an extremely insular culture, always has been. Everything is in France, nothing is anywhere else. Anything that's anywhere else doesn't matter. And so, for example, take, say, some other domain, logical positivism. It spread over the world in the 20s, 30s. By the 1950s and 60s, it had been sort of assimilated into the currents. It wasn't a passionate ideology anymore. It never reached France. The first translations into French, of course, of work of the, say, Vienna positivists, it was actually in the 1980s. And it was from a young French philosopher, Pierre Jacob, who came to Boston, learned about it, and then came back and translated work from the 1930s and 40s, which by then had kind of mostly been forgotten in the West and was just being revived in Paris. And it's even true in fields like in the sciences. I mean, they have a rich tradition in some areas, but say, I remember about 30 years ago or so, there was an article in some science journal discussing the history of the acceptance of evolutionary theory, sort of Darwinian evolutionary theory, as it spread around the world. And it pretty much the same course, some resistance finally overcame it. By the time the article was written, it was the standard scientific doctrine everywhere, with one exception, France. A large number of the professional biologists were still pre-Darwinian. This didn't seem plausible to me, so I asked a friend who's a Nobel laureate in biology who got his education in France, in fact. I asked him, does that make any sense? And he just laughed. He said, the only reason it isn't 100% true is that Jacques Monod had been in the resistance, and as a reward for his resistance service, he was granted a small laboratory, and out of that laboratory came all of the great French modern biology. Monod, Jacob, other great biologists, was that little item. Well, this gets back to the Stalinism and Maoism of the 1970s. That suddenly collapsed. One of the things that caused it to collapse was Solzhenitsyn's Gulag. It was translated in France, big sensation. All of a sudden, everyone became a passionate anti-communist. And since it's Paris, they had to be the first ones who ever discovered it. So I remember going there and hearing from leading intellectuals things I knew when I was 10 years old, because we were reading it then, But it was all new, discovered, and they had to have something novel.